Thank you all for coming. This demo theater is entitled Designing Enterprise Sites, which is part of your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. I'm Graham Hudgens. I'm a product engineer who works on hub and enterprise sites out of the DC R&D Center.
And I'm Shannon Kaliski. I'm a product manager for data science. You can't hear me. See, I told you. I'm Shannon Kaliski. I'm a product manager. It's back there. Oh, he's so stealthy. I didn't even see him go back there. This is why they have them wear all black. Sneaky. Anyway, I'm a product manager for sites and notebooks and lots of other things. Let's get started.
Yeah, so just a quick overview of what is enterprise sites. Enterprise Sites is a new app that's part of 10.6.1 Portal Base. You don't need to add on anything. It will be installed with your portal. And the goal of Enterprise Sites is to offer a non-GIS interface to your portal. So it's an app that you can configure and launch many websites. I'll come back up a little bit. So as many site items as you like, and underneath each of these sites, you can also launch sub-pages that hang underneath of them. These pages can actually be reused in multiple sites, and I'll be showing off some of this here in 0 seconds. So why do we build this? Today, if you wanted to share GIS data to your non-GIS users, you would probably do something like this. You would make a group, put those users in that group, take whatever subset of the portal that you want to share with them, and give them this sort of user experience, the group details page. And for a non-GIS user, there's a lot going on this screen. The portal app is meant to be a really powerful tool to help you tag and organize and make your data really stand out. But for a non-GIS user, where do I click? What do I do? What do you want me to do with this data? Some of these questions are a little unclear. So you can take the same information and make it available in an enterprise site. The site has a subcatalog of your portal, which I'll show you just quickly in the administrator view, where I can pick a subset of my groups. Let me make this a little bigger for those in the back. So I can pick within this site, what data do I want to show up? Wake up, computer. Wake up, internet. Well, you'll just have to take my word for it. There are 17 items inside of the site. I think 3 in some of these other groups. Let's see what's happening.
The way you find that is if you right-click the group name, it'll tell you all of the items in that group. And then once you're in there, you can select the individual items to go see what they are. This way, it's really helpful because if people have put junk in a group, unbeknownst to you, you don't want that junk showing up where you want non-GIS users to go, because they may have meant it harmlessly. They were just testing something out, and all of a sudden there's something with no information. It's called test. The tag is ASDF, home row keys, and that's it. Really, everything that goes into your site should have the highest quality experience that you can deliver, because people do not know that there is anything else behind the hood. For them, it's just this magical experience, and somehow you are all the greatest web developers in the world for delivering this like that. Okay, back to you, Grant.
Yeah, and hopefully our internet woes are resolved. Let's see if we can succeed now. So while we wait for that, the site gives you an opportunity to surface your data in a way that users can find featured maps and apps and content that you want to have on the top of the site, and any of the items that are underneath and available in your portal. Some people share 2 or 3 apps this way. You probably don't need to use a search experience to get around 2 or 3 apps. You can just feature them or embed them in a site. But some people also share thousands of items with different users, and they want to make it available in different organizations. So you can configure these sorts of categories to be sub-tag searches on the data or subgroups within the content that's in this site.
And kind of as I've talked to people building sites, I've learned that there's a kind of bifurcation amongst our end users. Some people love to be able to just go to a search bar, type in some words, and get going. Other users hate this idea. They don't like the unknown. They don't want to search for something that they don't know will be there. And they like to be able to just browse page after page of content. And for them, you can use the categories, which we'll get into a little bit later, to make it easier for them to paginate through all of the results. Whereas if you have people who like to search, that search bar front and center really helps solve that problem.
Yeah, so underneath each site is a search experience. This is modeled after search engines. So think about your non-GIS user now able to find the quick apps and maps on the top home layout. And then if they're looking for something specific, they can find it inside your portal. This page is equivalent of the item details page and lets users quickly explore the data in a map or take a look at the data in a table, filter it. If the service is a hosted feature service with extract enabled and a download has been created, this download button will be enabled for users to download a copy of the data as well to work with it on their own workstations. I call it a last mile solution. You're really just taking the same portal and making it available to users who aren't used to looking at the portal. That's a quick overview. Just to really show you behind the scenes, if I go to my portal, the way you get to sites is to click into this app launcher, and I'm taken to a sites administrative application that's very simple. I can create new sites with this green button, and each site has a card here. Sites themselves are items. They'll show up in your content. They can be shared to different users. If users can't see the site, they won't be able to see it, just like any other item in your portal. And as I mentioned, there are several subsettings of the site that lets you define things like the groups that are attached to it. So let's go back to the slides. It's good to have a plan when you go into working with sites. Something that some people will do is play around with it, which is perfectly natural, but if a lot of people start playing around with it, there can be a lot of sites out there. People can be trying to get at the same concept. So hopefully I'll give you a couple of tips here about how you can build a good plan. First off, to set it up, it's very easy. You only need an administrator and a portal on 10.6.1 or greater. I will mention on 10.6.1, we highly recommend you apply a general patch for enterprise sites. It was our first go around as a team of putting something in enterprise and just a couple snags. If you apply the patch, everything will work pretty well. When you click on that Sites App Launcher tile as an admin, it will initialize the application, and then you get to decide who in your organization do you want to make websites. You get to build a website team. And optionally, once you do this, we create an item version of that Sites App Launcher that goes with that membership of that group, that team. So if you're a finicky portal admin and you don't like the admins having two sites, remove the one that comes pre-installed, and this one will only show up for members that are defined here in this team tab. And all this is doing behind the scenes is creating a group in your portal that's an update group so that everybody who's in the sites team can edit sites that are created here. The idea being, if somebody on the website team goes on vacation, somebody else can actually work on the production websites that are serving your users. And this can be customized as well by changing the sharing of items and doing some things like that.
Another quick tip on how to get that extra site icon to not show up in your main ones is that you can actually drag it down to the show more, so you'll only see one up there. It doesn't totally remove it. For that, follow the workflow in the doc. But if you just don't want to see two in your top row, drag one and you won't see it anymore.
Good tip. So for planning, there's a saying in scuba diving of plan the dive and dive the plan. So it's a good idea to spend just some number of minutes making a plan before you actually jump in and start making sites for your non-GIS users. I recommend you start with something small, like a proof of concept, before you build the master plan. Don't go too crazy. Try to pick one really good use case and nail it. Learn the application, learn its limits, learn what it can do. My number one recommendation is target a group of users that is using the portal today that may not come to Esri conferences and may not be using your data as much as you would like. Are you getting too many emails from these people? And you're like, no, just go to the portal. Those are the people to target first. It's really popular to do things like a department site or a site for each region, group, base, oil rig, you name it. I've heard a lot of really good ideas here at the conference this week. Look forward to seeing more. Another strategy is to say, no, you know what? I'm going to make a generic org-wide, portal-wide site for my non-GIS users and put all my data in that. And that's not a bad idea either. It's kind of like the Omni site. So that's another strategy. You can have that as your proof of concept as I'm going to put all my groups that I want to share with my external users and have thousands of items there and show my categories and do something that way. Third idea for you to consider is if you have a portal collaboration, you hang out for the next talk after this, you can do a site just featuring the collaboration. What's cool about that is you can actually brand it in that other organization's kind of feeling so that users know they're not actually working with your organization's data, they know you're working with another organization's data. So just pick one. Don't do all of these. You can do all of these, but just start with one, learn the application. That'll kind of get you through, I would say, the initial phase of your design. And we have a bunch of examples, not of enterprise sites, because you all have firewalls and DMZs and words, but because we have ArcGIS Online. And in Online, this same website technology is inside a product called the Hub, which you can turn on by enabling open data in your organization and all that. But the nice thing is you can actually use the Hub's websites to inspire you on different websites designs themselves. So you can take a picture of this, but the next slide is going to be better. So this is a site for a project. This is a site featuring financial data. This is a site featuring another project. This is a city dashboard. This is an open data site. And you might want to visit these yourselves. Good news, you can. We've featured some of our favorites on this website. I'll wait here. And hopefully in like another 3-6 months, we'll actually have a better exemplar of enterprise sites. We're kind of learning how you guys are using them. 10.7 is our second release of the app in enterprise, so we're kind of the new kid, minus the newer kid over here with notebooks. We have created some internal examples using our patterns and practice team. These are Esri staff kind of ideating. Some people have made sites, kind of eating our own dog food too, made sites featuring internal data, documentation, made sites kind of more app focused with summary statistics about the data, making the data available underneath it. Notice you can embed content inside sites. I'll show you some of that in a little bit. And the other examples that are here. And this will grow as the product grows in enterprise.
Another thing that we've really seen people start to want to use sites for is creating sites of sites. And this is a really cool use case. And it's something that I would say we could probably smooth it a little bit more in the future, but it's something totally achievable today. All of your sites can be linked to from within your main site. So this can give you the ability to create one landing page that you can send users to, and they say, oh, I am a geologist, click on that one, that is for me. And it just quickly gets them where they need to go in a way that is visually streamlined so they don't have to go back, find their group, anything like that.
Yep. So on the same vein, this is where the next phase of planning. You've done one, you feel good. Maybe you have a couple ideas, a couple departments are coming to mind in terms of use cases. They like the proof of concept. Now this is where you want to make a plan. Because if you don't, and not that this is a bad thing, but you'll end up with an archipelago, a bunch of islands of sites that are different from each other, that don't fit, and they're kind of divorced. They're all remote from each other, kind of available and sent ad hoc to different groups. You might want to build something that's more like a city, where there's a central place, there's neighborhoods, and there's sub-areas of interest within that. So building a city obviously takes planning. Building a bunch of islands still takes planning, but it's a different strategy. So two important questions that you'll have to ask yourself that'll drive this sitemap is, one, how will this site fit into an existing organization's site that you may have? Think about where those non-GIS users are used to going from like a tool perspective. Do they have like a wiki or a Confluence kind of thing? Do they use some system, SharePoint, Chatter, Salesforce? I don't know. But it might be a good idea to get a link to your site built into that, because that'll help. If it will improve your discoverability. A cautionary tale, if you succeed and you have kind of a site on the side, you might eventually have to solve this problem. So it's kind of best to face it up front and think about it up front. Ask your stakeholders if there's a place that they expect. Try to do some of that.
Another thing to think about in this stage is, how are you going to get your users in? So remember that within ArcGIS Enterprise, you have unlimited viewers at no extra cost. So you can actually configure your enterprise portal that when people hit your site for the first time, you're automatically adding them as a viewer. So that is something that you can look into, because otherwise you don't want to have the experience where people come to your site and then can't get in. You only get maybe 3 shots with them, and that's even generous before they stop going.
The other question is do you need that root site, the mama site, the one that you can point to say, here's my GIS in its entirety for the non-GIS audience. So this is an example of the island kind of situation, 3. 3 different sites, 3 different feelings, and they're not connected at all. Easiest way to upgrade from this to something else is to use the home page of your portal and customize it to be, instead of tiles to things like groups or apps, make it all tiles that link out to sites. This is really easy to configure. It looks something like this. So you could have like your portal be the launch pad, because if people are used to going to it maybe, and rather than sending them into a group page, you can just be like, find your department name and jump into that.
And to do this, all you need to do is take your site application items from within your enterprise portal, put those in one group that you want to show up on this ribbon. So instead of having featured maps and apps, new group, your site application items, they will show up here. Make sure that you're giving them thumbnails, so that way these thumbnails look nice and pretty for people. And then once they click in, so if we were to click crime control strategies, it will automatically launch me into that site. So this is something a lot of organizations have wanted to do because they've already invested so much time into training their organization, go to the portal homepage. Yep. So this is one way you could do that.
So the next way, kind of increasing in sophistication, is to install some governance. As a website team, the people who make these sites, you decide on some kind of centralized system that'll get you between different sites and departments and things like that. The way to do that is if you take those 3 islands, put the same exact header on each one, have the same links in each site. So now every time you're on a site, you can kind of get between them. So that's like kind of level 2. Level 3 is you can use a site itself as the root site, which takes some change management. You have to like teach people that, okay, now you have to go to this URL, but this URL will get you everywhere to all the sub parts of your organization. The nice thing about this one, though, is it has more customization options in the site editor than you do in the home page of your portal. And we are, in our backlog, working on allowing that home page to be a site as well as like a configuration of your portal, but that's not yet available in the product. And just another example to think of that external case again, this is, I live in Washington, D.C. The mayor launched a website not using ArcGIS, but if you scroll down the page, there's like a by the numbers section with a bunch of tiles. And when I click it, I take to a bunch of GIS sites. Don't really have a clue that that's happened as a user. So that's kind of another way to do it. Find the root site that exists, inside your organization and just assimilate your content into it seamlessly. And users will just be able to kind of find the right data, download things, experience maps and things like that pretty easily. And then just for the sake, I haven't said page a lot. I've been always talking about sites here. But now that we have the site map figured out, we can still have complex layouts within each site that have multiple different sub-pages in them. So you can have a layer of pages for each department. You can even reuse them between. So one kind of common practice is to make a site that's like how to use this site, and then write some content doc, for your end users, and then use the same page in all the different sites, and it picks up the branding of whatever site it's being viewed from. So it'll kind of morph to fit whatever it's going to. So this kind of is the sitemap conceptual diagram. How to do it? It's really easy. Just make a bullet list or use SmartArt in PowerPoint, however you like to communicate information. You could do fancy MindNode software I happen to have from a prior job to make your map. There's my root site, and maybe I have some sub-department sites and some pages off of that on the end. Or maybe I also have some orphans still. I'm kind of island city. My city's over here, my island's over here. These people are radical. Talked to some consultants this week that have different customers and they expose data to, so they might actually want to have unique islands and cities for each customer to feel differently. So a lot of different ways you can kind of skin this. And again, planning up front will make your life easier as you go to do this. And this is really probably how it'll happen. You'll sit with a whiteboard, you'll talk about all the capabilities, you'll play with that proof of concept, and then you'll draw boxes and arrows.
That's my method.
Yeah, that is the real method. I mean, this is, doesn't show well.
I usually have several things because I drew my first box too small. So I'm like, this is actually in there, right here.
So yeah, how you would do this is if I make a site, I can give it a name, and I'm going to make it big again. I can give it a URL, so departments. Notice it's appending the URL to the end of my portal. So that's how you would get to the site. You can set a default extent. It uses your orgs by default. You could change the base map if you want.
And this extent is what shows up. Remember earlier Graham showed us the results that came back? this is where that is going. So whatever you change here, that's where you're seeing it. A lot of people have asked me this question as they're building sites is, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
What is this? That's what you're doing. The search results. What does that look like? It may change if you have data that has that's way off the map. So just keep that in mind.
So we're at 10 minutes left, but I'll show you a little bit about the actual mechanics within a site. But just to kind of complete this, you can make a site, and now I'm in this area where I can set what the site looks like in a drag and drop user interface. So if I don't like a piece of content, I can remove it. And if I want to add something else, I can drag it on just by clicking and holding and dragging it to one of these little drop zones and get new rows of information, and then maybe put a map or a piece of content, a chart on here.
And the rows are really important. They're going to allow you to be able to visually break up your page into different pieces, or your site into different pieces, and be able to reorganize things. So what I've seen a lot of people do in their first site is they just have one row and they just put everything in it. But if you actually use the different rows for the different pieces, you're going to get a much more elevated experience across your site. Like, it'll just look like you spent more time on it, even though all you're doing is adding extra rows.
And rows also let you decide if the content's full width, which is good for things like maps and iframes, if you want to link in some BI tool you may have or some other system. And narrow ones, the box is good for content that is not full width, like not content, just things like tiles or text or images and things like that. Okay, so making pages, just to show you that really quick. We are running out of time. Underneath each site, I can either make a new page that hangs under here called Department Help. And all this is another set of layout options that hang under my department website. So there's my department website /pages/department help. And this will pick up, like I mentioned, the header from the site itself. So there's my header in white, but I get a whole different layout that I can customize. So good for building that department's complex website.
And what I would encourage all of you to do is don't feel confined to the default template. One of the things that we work on internally in Esri is teaching people how to go beyond the default. If you start looking out at different examples, you'll notice that from that very first page you land on, there's some pieces in there that Graham and team have added to help give you examples. But sometimes it can be really hard to break beyond that. So one of the things we're working on is putting this out there through blogs and other ways so that you can see that you aren't limited to that. You can delete all of the things that are in the page, start from scratch, and start building something that's totally custom.
Yep.
And you're still using these out-of-the-box tools. It's still drag and drop, but with just a little bit of HTML or CSS, and just a little bit. I mean, the people that are building this are by no means web developers. You can really take it to a completely different level.
Yep. And if you have any resources that, CSS, HTML people, they can help you to really quickly integrate your existing organization's themes and things like that. Final notes on planning. Once you do it and it's out there, a lot of people will be like, it's done, moving on, which is a perfectly fine strategy. A lot of people do that. But people will stop coming back to websites if the content goes stale. Changing what's featured is a good idea. Also, there's a little time bomb here called Chrome. If it's set to auto update, very rarely you can kind of change how your custom HTML and things like might work. So maybe set a reminder once a quarter or once a month to check in on your site and refresh the content slightly. It's not a lot of work. And some of our customers in online have made sites from years ago that have thousands of people look at them in a given year and they haven't touched it in years. But try to come in every so often. It'll help things.
And make sure you're checking from the GIS side as well, because I've seen what happens is there'll be people who've created maps or apps and they will go and they do an update, but maybe they don't share the layer or they took away the layer that it was expecting. And so all of a sudden in the site, it's showing something different than what you had envisioned. So go do a run through, check through, not only does the browser respect what you wanted, but is the GIS content, the maps, the apps, the everything else looking like you expected it to look?
Yep. So we have a talk later today to kind of go through how to good portals make good sites, great portals make great sites. That's at 2 o'clock. But I'm going to cover just a really high level about the layout fundamentals, and we'll go into more detail if you're interested in a technical workshop for 60 minutes later. So the site layout has these kind of high level components. I've already mentioned the header system. One thing I didn't show, which I should have. is you can take this default bar, but you can also customize it. So when I had mentioned making a site that links you to lots of other sites, and my theme's not so great, probably should fix that, but I can actually take this entire block up here and change its HTML, change where these links go, change what the links are to make it look totally different. So that's a good idea for a header. The theme will decide what all of the pages on your site look like, including all the sub pages. So that item details page, that search results page, the top page, all of it, and the fonts that are being used. So make sure if you make a theme that you don't just kind of like leave it and just look at the one layout. Go look at all of the different pieces of your site to make sure it's working. I've seen a lot of people do, the layout looks great, and then you jump into that item and it looks terrible, or it's like black on gray and it looks kind of strange. So keep that in mind. We talked about the row card. It's the card that all other cards go into. It's like the proto card or parent card. It also has theme overrides. So as you go up and down the page, if you have kind of contrasting theme colors in your brand, you can have like differences. So it's not just this like doctor's office feeling site. It's got some, visual interesting things below the fold. All the pieces of the site that you see here on the right, like the map, the category cards, the search bars, they're all placeable cards that go into those rows. And there are many types of cards available to support different design choices. Some of them can summarize your feature services. Some of them can chart your feature services. Some of them are just visual, like images and things like that. At the bottom, there's the footer, good for resources, but nobody really looks at footers. So it's like, put all your citations, your attributions, your legalese, anything else you need that has to be on every site. Footer shows up on every single page of the app, no matter where you are. So it doesn't just show up on the top, shows up on all those other sub pages.
And one thing on the theme is your colors and fonts. That's the main thing it is. If your organization has brand guidelines, amazing, use them. If they don't, look to some helpful browser tools. A lot of browsers, like my go-to is Chrome, have color pickers where you can take your organization's logo or just an image that you like, extract out those colors, put it in there, and then that way you're building something that is really beautiful. Because what tends to happen is the default goes to blue, and so instinctually, for some reason, we want to go to the opposite, putting us in the fuchsia orange range. The default font is black, so let's go to a green. Terrible, terrible, terrible sites. I have been guilty of making them. So as you're building your sites, think through the theme choices. Subtle is good. A lot of people like minimalist now. So just consider who your audience is and what do they expect this experience to look like. If it looks totally divorced from anything else they're going to, you're going to lose some credibility, even if it looks phenomenal, because they're going to feel like they ended up somewhere they weren't supposed to be.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind.
And everything, I don't know if you guys caught it, I was going to show, this is a Chrome extension that's really useful for that type of activity, to pick colors out of something existing if you don't have a brand guideline that tells you the color. Type Chrome extension eyedropper thing into Google and you'll probably find it. I now realize many organizations can't install things like that. We have 3 minutes left, but I have one more point to make. Many more points to make, but 3 minutes left. The grid system that's being used is called Bootstrap 3. This is a web tech that responds as the browsers get smaller. So we want our sites to work really well on mobile. There are 12 columns you can work with across your site. So that manifests as you place cards. Watch these cards in the middle. You can hover over these arrows and make content take different sizes. And as the screen gets smaller, it all stacks vertically. So that's a pretty good way to make your site work. My boss has a really small laptop. He likes it. He's like, it travels better. But he always makes sure that we're responsive so that the site looks good even on smaller form factors. And
as you saw Graham scroll through those categories, you'll notice it kind of felt like a lot of scrolling. Think about how your audience is mostly going to be accessing it. If they're going to be on mobile devices all of the time, that great gallery of categories can start feeling very long. So if you know that they are going to be on a mobile device, start thinking, how do I streamline this? What is this going to look like? Do the Chrome tool of either scrunching your browser or just looking at it in the mobile view. And that way, you're creating the best experience all the way around.
So that's our time. Thank you so much for expressing interest. We're over at the ArcGIS Enterprise booth.